So yes.
Thank you.
Good
John,
morning.
over to you.
Thank you, Hojo. Can everyone hear me clearly? Thank you. I'm honored this morning to introduce Zenku Jerry Smyers. Zenku is a Soto Zen priest in the lineages of Soyu Matsuoka Roshi and Shohaku Okamura Roshi. Zenku began his training as a disciple of Kongo Langwa Roshi, the abbot of the Zen Buddhist Temple of Chicago, and a Dharma heir of Matsuoka Roshi in 1976. If you're doing the math, that's almost 50 years ago. Zenku trained at the Zen Buddhist Temple of Chicago and was ordained a Zen priest in 1982. Zenku was a priest in Chicago until 2005, assisting Kongo Roshi until his passing in 1999, and then providing temple leadership. In 2005, Zenku moved to Montana and established the Mission Mountain Zen group in Dayton, Montana. In 2010, Zenku became a disciple of Tayun Elliston Roshi, who's with us this morning. The abbot of the Atlanta Soto Zen Center and a Dharma heir of Matsuoka Roshi, and Okamura Roshi from the Uchiyama lineage. In 2012, Zenku received Dharma transmission from Tayun Roshi. Zenku, we welcome you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I'd like to begin the interview, Zenku. Explain what your Dharma name means first, so people are not confused by it.
Yeah, my Dharma name, Zenku. Zen, of course, means meditation. It's really our practice. And ku means emptiness. So it means Zen emptiness. And so for me, it needs no more explanation than that. But I think for most of us, for some of us, it might require a little more. Emptiness in Zen means interdependent. That we exist interdependent with each other and with the world around us. We don't exist by ourselves, and so emptiness simply means the interdependent nature of all things and how we intertwine in life with everything. So,
thank you for that
yeah.
explanation. I was just wondering if Zen emptiness is different from other emptiness.
Say that again, Roshi. I couldn't hear that real
I
good.
said I was just wondering if Zen emptiness is different from other kinds of emptiness.
Well, maybe on paper, but I would say in reality, no.
So what I'd
Everything
like
is
you to do,
interdependent.
before we talk about your Zen career, if that's so appropriate name for it, in either your case or mine, tell us a little bit about your beginnings. Now, I know more about you than most people here, and we're both boys from Illinois, as we say. And but you had a story. I think you were at Carbondale Southern Illinois University. I'm not sure where Bucky Fuller was headquartered, and you had the story where you were wandering around the wilds of Illinois before you moved to Chicago. Can you go back that far and just sort of tell us where you
Yeah,
were born, catch us up a little bit? Not white
yeah,
picket fence stuff, but just in general.
certainly.
25
Yeah,
words.
no, I'd be happy to. Yeah, no, we're both from Illinois. That's absolutely right, Roshi and I. And I'm a little further north. I grew up on a farm in Iroquois County in Illinois. It's about 80 miles south of Chicago, but really very lot of farm country. The biggest town was called Watseka, and there were 5,000 people in it. And but I lived about 5 miles out of town, and my father was a regular grain farmer, and he had some livestock, and so that was my humble beginnings, and it was just a wonderful beginning. I have no regrets, even though going to town, and when I went to school, going to town, there were the country kids and there were the townies, and so
Right.
there was a little bit of clash there. But anyway, long story short, I wind up going to college in Illinois at
Did
Western
you?
Illinois University.
Western. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
over on the west side of the state. Really an incredibly expanding experience for me, being from a rural farm country. And many people there were from Chicago and that kind of thing. And it was during the 60s. But and so that was a whole nother chapter for me. I learned a great deal through the Vietnam War issues around the integration and the all the peace movements that were going on. And so that was quite a learning experience for me. My father died when I was in college. I was a senior in a farm accident, so it was kind of out of the blue, and that kind of really, I was already on the edge, let's say, with all the chaos in the world and everything else. That kind of pushed me over, and so that was, it was the most terrible thing that ever happened to me. But at the same time, when I look back, it was maybe one of the best things that ever happened to me at the same time because
Wake up call.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, a wake up call, as I'm saying.
Yes, wake up call. So it kind of foisted me into doing some searching. What is going on? What can I do? And so anyway, I found Zen through that experience.
If
And
memory serves, you told me you had some sort of connection to Zen before you went to Chicago, before you met Matsuoka and so on, or
yeah, no, I practiced. I was kind of practicing by myself, and I had a couple of friends I would sit with a couple of years before I met Kongo Roshi.
well, how did you first come across Zen?
Well, I first came across Zen when I was at Western Illinois University. I had a really cool friend that was into Zen, you know, in quotes kind of thing, as we all were at the beginning. And so we would talk about it a little bit, and we were trying to find things to read about it. We read some of like Dharma Bums and some of Jack
Yeah,
Kerouac's material, and some of those things were very stimulating for us, and trying to look at things in a little different way, and Eastern philosophy was trickling in the 60s, and we were all trying to understand it more. And it just turned out that Zen practice, I was going to go around and check all of the different meditation techniques. I needed something to calm down and kind of
right.
focus. And so transcendental meditation was pretty big then, and Zen was there, and a few other things. But I started with Zen. It just so happened that I got a book and I started reading, I started practicing, and I need search no further, was kind of how I felt. I really,
Did let me stop you for a minute. Did the psychedelic revolution hit the campus at that time?
in a huge way, absolutely, yeah. The Merry Prankster Party, which was,
All
which
right.
was, if you weren't there, you may not know anything about that, but it was just a way of organizing young people, and basically in protest to the Vietnam War, and and things like that.
Yep.
And so anyway, yes, Western Illinois University was front and center with that because we're really not too far from Chicago, and there's a lot of influence at
Right.
the university, which was pretty vibrant at
We
that
saw it
time.
at U of I and the School of the Art Institute where I was teaching, also talking students down from bad trips and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But
Okay. Just carry us into the next chapter if you can, then I have some more specifics that I want to ask you.
okay. I just wanted to say that after I got out of college, lo and behold, I got drafted. But in the meantime, I had become I was raised a Quaker, by the way. I didn't talk about that, but so there was a history in my family of conscientious objectors, people who wanted to serve the country, but not in a military way. Would not serve, and so it was honored. And so luckily, I had that tradition. My father was such, and my brother, and so I was able to do civilian service. And so I went to Iowa City, Iowa, and worked on a project with the Catholic Archdiocese there. And then after that, a friend of mine from college had bought some land in southern Illinois, about, maybe 40 acres. And we were in the woods, and he wanted to form a commune of friends that let's live together and let's work together. And so I said, yeah, that sounds great. And there was a one house that was way about 3 or 4 miles separate, and it was kind of like a hermitage. And so lo and behold, that's where I wound up staying because I just wanted to practice zazen and read and that kind of thing. And if I wanted to socialize, I would walk down to the main part of the commune and hang out with people. So it was a wonderful experience, and that's how I got to Southern Illinois. And that is right next to Southern Illinois University, where Buckminster
Wow.
Fuller was in residence for some time. And one of the people on the commune wanted to build a geodesic dome, which was one of Buckminster
We
Fuller's
all did.
designs. And so I volunteered to help him. So the two of us, over the course of several weeks, we got the designs, we got the wood, we start cutting and piecing together and built this dome. It was just a fantastic experience. I enjoyed that very much. But anyway, the whole communal situation was a wonderful experience. I was there about 3 years before it sort of started disbanding. And that was about the time that I realized that I needed some stimulation and I needed a teacher. And I, through a friend, had found out about Congo Roshi up in Chicago. And so I started to travel up and visit my friend and Congo Roshi at the Zen Buddhist Temple of Chicago.
You were still single at this time?
No, what happened there was I was in the Hermitage, and once in a while I would go up to the family farm. When my father passed, my siblings tried to run it, and at the time that I was in Southern Illinois at this commune, my sister and her husband were running the farm. So once in a while I would go up and help them. We had a big chicken farm, a lot of egg production, and so I would go up and help them with that from time to time. And a friend of theirs came down from Chicago, Teresa, and I met her. And long story short, she came down and spent about a year in the commune in Southern Illinois with me, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. And the year that you mentioned that I became a disciple of Congo Roshi, we had moved to Chicago that year, like in the summer of '76. And Teresa and I got married in June of that year. And then I became a disciple of Congo Roshi, at Ohigan in the fall that year. So that was kind of one of my, banner years.
Now, so your first year was 77, which is when we incorporated Atlanta Soto Zen Center that same year.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us about your first, think back to the first time you went to the Zen Buddhist Temple Chicago on Halsted Street there and met Congo Roshi, or Matsuoka, I assume, was in Long Beach by then. He moved there when I moved to Atlanta in 1970.
Right, right. Yeah, he definitely did. The thing about Matsuoka Roshi, though, his presence was kind of always felt in that in the early days, he would come back often at Ohigan, both spring and
Yeah.
fall. So we would see him somewhat frequently, and we were always talking about Matsuoka Roshi. What was he doing? And he's famous for whenever he would come and visit, he would often say things like you could tell he was checking us out. He was making sure that we were earnest and we were practicing properly. And he would say things like, "Soji ji eheji, waiting for my report." These are the two headquartered temples in Japan. So we would know that he was going to report on how things are going in Chicago, and it was kind of funny. But Kongo Roshi was one of those people that was very down to earth in some ways, but he was very much Chicago kid. No
Yeah.
nonsense. A little kind of tough. Hey, don't mess with me. Kind of a thing. But really, had a great sense of humor. He was a musician and a great communicator. It was interested in a lot of things. So it was beautiful because, a lot of the other teachers around the country were from Japan, were from India, whatever that was being taught. And there were not that many teachers that were Americans who could really lay it out for Americans, and you didn't have to worry about a thick foreign accent, and maybe you couldn't quite understand them. So
Right.
it really, Congo had a really good depth of experience, both from studying yoga deeply with a couple of teachers, and also studying Tai Chi Chuan, so Chinese influence from that perspective, and also Matsuoka Roshi, of course. And
Right.
so you could ask him anything and he would understand what you were saying, and he would help you understand from a how do we implement this in American life.
Yeah, Congo and I got to know each other pretty well the years we were together there. We're having a little bit of transmission. Your image is freezing up and jumping. It shrank in size. John, are you getting that same phenomenon as just here? Can't hear you, John. I think
Oh,
you're muted.
you're on mute.
John's on, John's on mute.
I'm getting good, clear video and audio. What about the rest of you online? Anybody having a problem?
It may just be our outfit here.
Is everybody okay or not so
Yeah,
much?
we hear you fine. You do freeze up occasionally, but the audio continues very stable.
Yeah. I think we're good
Okay.
to go. Good to continue. I mean,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
my internet's not real good here, but we've got both of our phones. We take them off Wi-Fi, so the only thing is this, but still, sometimes it's a little challenging.
all right. Well, some wag said it's a lot easier to have your Zen master 2,000 miles on the other side of the country than just down the block. So, but Matsuoka Roshi and I, over all those years from 1970 on, he came here once a year at least, and I would go there. And fortunately, in Soto Zen, you don't have to live together. It's not a codependent type of relationship. It can be rather informal because we rely on the meditation so strongly. And you just sort of check in with each other once in a while and see what's going on. So let me ask you if you can recall your first exchange with Congo, and then I would like you to see if you can recall your first exchange with Matsuoka.
Well, let's see.
You knew there would be a test, didn't you?
Interesting enough, it may have been. I think we think that it was. It may have been the very first time that I met Kongo Roshi. I went to the temple like on a Sunday afternoon service, and he was running the show, and we would do a couple of periods of zazen, chanting, and then we would chant before and after the zazen, and then he would offer tea in the back room, at the temple on Halsted Street in Lincoln Park. And it just so happens, I think there was only two attendees that day. It was me and my comrade Stuart Erickson down here, who's on the line, and Stu and I didn't know each other at all. But anyway, Congo's there, and we're talking to him and getting to know him, and I was very impressed with Congo. he was just an impressive person. He spoke very clearly, very emphatically, and you could tell he was very interested, in Zen practice, and so that was wonderful. But anyway, long story short, he asked me where I'm from, and I said I'm from Southern Illinois, and Stu had just started going to well, he was about to go to Southern Illinois University to college, and so we meet at the temple with Kongo Roshi, and that played out, as you can see, we've been lifelong friends, but we also had a Zen group in Carbondale at the university together. And that's how we really helped cement our lifelong friendship. But that was Kongo Roshi, and I many stories I could tell about Kongo Roshi. I think the first time I met Matsuoka Roshi, we picked him up at the airport. We went out, and it was back in the day when you could just go to the gate, watch him come off the airplane. Hello, hey, all right. And so then we would, and Roshi always liked disciples to go get Matsuoka Roshi. So we would have an opportunity to spend some time with him and get to know him better. And we would pick him up and get his luggage, get in our car, and zoom off to the Zen Buddhist Temple of Chicago. We would then come into the temple, and we would immediately chant the Hanya Shingyo to welcome him in front of the altar. And but I
Hanya
always,
Shingo, those who don't know here, is the Heart Sutra in Japanese.
yeah, right. And but I spent several times with Matsuoka Roshi, together, and he was always a very warm. There was only a couple of times that maybe some things happened that were, I may have regretted, and so there was a little blowback. But generally speaking, he was very kind and everything. And I remember one time, I think the first time he ever heard me do the Doan, lead the service, do the bells and announce the chant, and he, I think he said something to me very flattering. He said, "Very professional." So I thought, okay, that's good. I passed that hurdle.
He was funny. He would often say, almost perfect, but before I forget. And then he would
Yeah,
tell you what you
right,
did wrong.
right, right.
So let's see, where do we go from here? You were in Chicago how many years?
Well, let's see. I moved there in '76, and we left there in '05. So I just round up to 30 years.
Pretty much there.
Okay.
And you know
Your
what? Here's what was interesting, Roshi. If I can jump in here,
sure.
I was
If
on
you're in
the
it.
I was in a communal situation in Southern Illinois, and it was really sweet. We were in the Ozarky country, wonderful
Oh, yeah.
forests, and it's just beautiful country down there. And I was really interested in my Zen practice. It was great. Everything was going fine. Uh, we actually picked fruit in the fall. There were orchards around, and I had enough money from that I could exist for the rest of the year. So it really worked out beautifully. But because I didn't have stimulation around my practice, and I wanted that. That was the main driver that took me to Chicago. I didn't want to have to get a job. I didn't want to have to join society in a way. Don't get me wrong, but having done so and jumping through the hurdles and the challenges that you have to go through in ordinary life to find a job, to keep a job, to have a family, to be a disciple, on and on it goes, was a wonderful experience for me. And my challenges that I encountered at work, working at various places in the computer industry were great challenges for me, helped push me along. And I always said, without my Zen practice, I could have never done what I did professionally, uh, to the extent that I
Tell
did.
us a little bit more about your professional activities there. A little more specifics about it, just so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was a math major in college, a physics minor, so I had a propensity toward math. I was comfortable with it, and so the computer industry was booming in the 70s. You know, it was like, it was really fledgling, you know, very new. And nobody was trained in college. They didn't have any courses, hardly, in the early going in the 60s. In the early 70s, they started to. But so if you had aptitude, companies would hire you and train you. And it was, so that's how it worked for me. There
Right,
was a
right.
few wrinkles for me, but I got into, you know, programming, and I got in on the ground floor, you could say. And little by little, I became a got into database administration, and then I got into management, technical management, and then data center management of large data centers. And I worked generally through the whole period for big banks. And I say it's several banks, but it was really funny because I think I worked for 4 or 5 banks during the course of my career. But through most of those times, I had the same cubicle, the same, you know, office,
Huh.
because I kept having the same customers. It's just a different bank bought it, and we got bigger and bigger.
Right,
And at the end, you know, it was JP Morgan Chase. And,
right.
but anyway, I had great collegiality with my coworkers, and I worked right in downtown Chicago in the Loop, and I commuted in and back and forth. The commuter system in Chicago is delightful. And so
You did,
it was
you did
good,
project
good thing.
management on large projects, right? You were
Correct,
project
correct. Yeah,
manager.
that was at the very end of my career. I got into project management, and there was this one project. It was called I think it was something like $1 trillion baby, and it was, we were converting all of our we had bought many banks. We're trying to get them all into one system, and over $1 trillion a day gets flushed through this system. And so, you know, no pressure, but so anyway, luckily I had really good people working on the team. And the funny thing about it was, all of it was done. My people were in Chicago. I was in New York. Many of them were in New York. Some people were even in London. And I'm in Chicago, and we didn't really have Zoom, or we didn't have anything video. We just had the phone. And so we had
Right,
conference calls on the
right.
phone with 20, 30 people, and we're trying to organize this project. And luckily, luckily, it went very, very well, very smooth.
Good.
And I remember one time, this was probably the biggest opportunity I had. I was talking with the chairman of the bank. There was a meeting. I wasn't talking to him, but I was presenting, like, they were trying to make sure we were ready for the conversion that was happening this coming weekend. And so I always thought my boss would be the one doing the presentation, or his boss, or his boss. Uh, Nobody spoke up. And so lo and behold, it was me giving a presentation to the real high uppity ups. And, you know, I was cool, but believe me, my Zen practice was essential, to
Oh,
stay
yes, yes.
cool, to stay calm. So I
Yep.
delivered it, and you know, and then online and through emails, I got feedback from my managers and different people. Everybody said, "Beautiful job," you know. So anyway, my stock value went way up, you know, after that project. And so then I said, and they said, "Hey, whatever you want." They didn't want me to leave or anything. And that's how I got to move to Montana. I said, "Well, I'd like to move to Montana and still work at the bank." And so anyway, they allowed that. I did that for a couple of
Wonderful.
years.
I saw that bank consolidation from a retail design perspective. I was designing banks and communication systems for banks and within banks. More good reasons to go to the brick and mortar bank and so forth. And my first computer was a CPU. It had a little gray screen with green type, if you remember those.
Yeah, right.
And everybody
Right.
in the design profession did not want to convert to keyboards and mouses. We were all on drawing boards, right? Nobody wanted to do it. It was really a wrenching transition in design. Okay, good. Well, that's a wonderful scenario. I want to stop for a moment. Everybody take a deep breath and see if anybody has any comments or questions they would like for Zenku. Now, I'm not sure of the time.
Quarter after 11.
Okay, we got plenty of time, so we'll come back to you, Zenku, with some more interview questions. But first, let's see if anybody has anything. John, you online and we're on site, so let me look around the room here. It's got one from the back of the room to start.
You want me to walk up there just?
Yeah, a little closer to the mic, maybe. Yeah, this is Michael Will.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, thank you so much for being here and for the dialogue. I have probably a particularly unique question for you, but I know you mentioned earlier that you were raised Quaker. And, from my experience going to a Quaker meeting, I know a lot of them happen to be unprogrammed. And I don't know if you grew up going to unprogrammed Quaker meetings, but if you did, I was curious how the transition was for you from a programmed meeting where you go in and you sit in silence, almost like a meditational state, to Zazen and to Buddhism and to that practice.
Yeah, no, for me, it was very, very simpatico. It was, and I say it because, my feeling about being Quaker is fairly broad in that, my uncle, one of my favorite uncles, was a Quaker minister, and he married my mom's sister. And so he was a real mentor to me. But I always learned from him, and I was close enough to several ministers at the Quaker meeting. We called it the Friends meeting. It's a Friends is another term for Quakerism, and so I got to feel for how open-minded Quaker faith is, and it's like there's not dogma, very minimal dogma in it. And as you say, it's an open meeting. You kind of let the spirit move you, and if you have something to say, you share it with the group, and maybe that there's interaction around that. Otherwise, you just sit there in silence and enjoy each other's company. That's kind of the short of a short description of a Quaker meeting, and but really lovely, and the whole thing about just sitting and being, and that really resonated with me, and Zen. With Zen, we have a practice. We have some guidance about how do we just sit, and so that was really important because, in the tumultuous 60s, I was tumultuous, I had the chaos of the 60s in my mind, and so just to calm down a little bit, learn how to settle down. Sometimes you can't do that without a little help, and with Zazen instructions, very practical on, letting go of your obsessions about things. Just how do you calm down? Well, you let go of the anxiety, you let go of the confusion ultimately, and that's what Zen practice helps you with. And that's what I found so valuable. Going to church is great, and fellowship with others was wonderful, but to have a real practice that you could get your teeth into and work on daily, not only on your meditation cushion, but in your life. Let this moment be paramount to you. Take care of this moment, and don't get so involved in always living in the past or living in the future, in a thinking way. So anyway, for me, it was very direct, and very smooth, I would say.
If I may
You get one
reflect
follow-up.
back to
You get
you.
one follow-up.
If I may just reflect back to you, just so I can properly understand myself. It sounds like the Zazen practice offered a little bit more of guided structure to help you along the path, whereas you may not have felt that for the silence you experienced in, your Quaker experience in the Friends meetings. You missed that kind of valuable guided structured practice that you could really get in, fleshed out in depth.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way to put it. I think that's right. It turns out that the Quaker, the Society of Friends group, there was more structure to that meetings that I did not get involved in the traditional old school, everybody sits around in a circle very often. There would be some occasions, but generally speaking, when I would go to the Friends Church in Watsika or go to my uncle's church, he would be up at a podium, and we would always sitting in pews. So it was a little more like the normal Christian church setting.
Gotcha.
But I knew the tradition, and we all, like, not to go into great detail, but things like baptism. Some denominations make a big deal out of you have to be sprinkled, you have to be dunked in water in baptism, and it's a wonderful gesture. But in Quakerism, it was you're already baptized. You're born baptized. It was almost like in Buddhism we say our Buddha nature is within us. It's always there. And so in the Quaker faith, there was a more feeling that no, we are already, like Christ, Christ's nature, more in that way. So it really meshed nicely, I thought, with Buddhism.
Well, thank you so much. I'll withhold my other questions to allow room for other people.
We have his email. You can get in touch. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
So over to you, John. Online.
Thank you, Hojo. If anyone has a comment, a question, feel free to visually raise a hand or post the icon for the screen, or you could put one in the chat and I'll be happy to read it. I'll just recognize you as I see you. Who would like to comment or question?
Quiet groove.
Zenku, I'll just make a comment.
Stuart,
You
Stuart
Yeah,
has
we
his hand
have
up.
Oh,
Jess
I'm
in too.
sorry. Excuse me. Stuart, Stuart, please.
Yeah, Tesson, I didn't realize I had the English name only there. Yeah, something that's really a lot of fun is listening to Zenku, excuse me, go back over this history and realize having had such a wonderful opportunity to different different pieces, different components of this, really had a chance to share, and that he has not been just a wonderful pillar, I think, for STO, but I can attest to the fact that here in Chicago, that's the role that he always played here. So what he's doing, he has always done, which is, wholeheartedly shared to enrich everyone's understanding of the Dharma and encourage everybody in their practice.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, to reinforce that point, Zenku's been going back to Chicago, I think, at least once a year ever since he's moved, and helped keep the integrity or the continuity principle happening there in our home temple. Okay, over to us. This young lady, I think, first.
I'll just.
Give us your name again.
My name's Kat.
Hi,
Hi.
Pat.
I guess I was actually going to ask a very similar question about going from Quaker to Zen, but I guess my other question, you mentioned when you went from the commune to Chicago and just some of the challenges of like having like a real life, so to speak, or like, the day to day of like your job and like finding a job. What was like the biggest challenge to your Zen practice at that point?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I would say, moving to Chicago, I'd never lived in a big city before. I was a farm kid, and I like to have space, and I didn't. So going to Chicago, my motivation was my Zen practice. So that was my North Star. So everything else, I didn't dwell on everything else, but still, it was pretty daunting, to move into the big city, try to figure out how do I navigate that, what's going on. So that was definitely a challenge. But like I say, we had two children, so we raised our kids, my wife and I, and so there was a lot going on, and my wife was marvelous. We had our disagreements around all how much where I spent my time, of course, but she was wonderful to help the family situation stay round and positive. Even though I was at the temple a lot at retreats and ceremonies and different things like that and services, but you know, it's kind of like, you have to decide what are your priorities. And sometimes that's difficult, and sometimes you have to cut some things that you would like to have time with, but you have to work with your priorities. So Zazen, and of course my family, and I have to have a job. Those were always my priorities, and so you just make it work. You just make it work. Sometimes I know I would work, sometimes I'd work long days and trying to keep my Zazen, my daily Zazen practice vital. And that could be a challenge. I might be pretty fatigued by the time I wanted to sit in the evening. But I would get up in the morning sometimes too. So it's a juggling. It's just like life for all of us. It's a juggle. But you have to figure out what are your priorities and pursue those priorities. And priorities should be the things that you are most interested in. You have a yearning to go in that direction. And if you, so it wasn't easy, but it was very informative. Kongo Roshi would always say that living in the city was like a smelting pot. It's like, like making strong steel. Like, okay, you have this shaft that you're trying to get stronger. Maybe you're making a sword or whatever. You put it in the fire and you get it real hot. You bring it out and you have a hammer and you're hammering it, and then you stick it in the water. Then you put it, back in the flame, and this on and on we go. And a good sword, they elongate the thing, and then they fold it over and keep hammering it together until it's so strong. It doesn't break. It's not brittle. And so he would liken that to living in the city and our Zen practice. This idea of we go into the job, we've got pressures, we've got demands, and then we would come home and we would dunk ourselves in the cool water of our Zazen practice. This kind of an idea. And I thought it was quite, when you live in the city, as many of you do, you know what that means, and the hustle bustle of city life, and how to balance Zazen and how to balance your Zen practice. It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
If you ever get a chance to look at one of those swords close up, you'll notice it has a kind of a cloudy grain in it. That's where the metal has been folded in again and again and again and again. In fact, I had a wedding ring that was done. We have wedding rings that was done that way, on a much smaller scale. Okay, John, over to you. Anybody else online?
Ungen, I believe I saw a hand up from you.
You did. Zenku, I just wanted to thank you for being so open about your past I'd really never quite grasped where you came from and how you got where you were. I thought you were a DP guy, a math major DP guy, and now I find out that you're a damn hippie from the 60s.
Right.
Unreformed.
Yes, isn't that true? I didn't even use the hippie word, but yes, you hit it right on the head.
In-house, we had somebody. I thought we had somebody. Thanks. Steve, this is our resident priest in training, Ishirio Steve Carr from Newfoundland. Newfoundland.
Great, good to see you.
It's wonderful to see you. I wanted to follow up on the question that Mike asked and that we just referred to here. When you look over the history of, when you read about the history of Zen in North America, there's beat Zen in the 50s. And the whole surround of that seems to be chaos is good. That Zen has the crazy questions, and it has the koans. And so this is a way of escaping responsibility. But you have spoken, and other people that I have spoken, and when all of the teachers from Japan come over, it's very organized. And not organized in a bad way, but organized in order to go in the direction that serious practitioners want to go. Did you see this? I don't think you're quite old enough to be a beat. I'm not quite old enough to be a hippie. Did you see that tension when you began your practice?
Sure, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Um, the thing for me was, like if you look at some of the books that were written, Alan Watts and others, um, they were looking more at the surface of Zen, and but it was beautiful writings, and I think very inspirational writings, and I think they helped a lot of us find our way to Zen. But when you actually come to Zen, you come in the temple door, and this is a figurative thing. When you make a commitment to Zen, you realize, and you meet a Zen teacher, you realize that it's more, let's see, I'm going to say it's more direct than you might have thought. And it's not that you have opinions and you're boxed into your opinions about life. In fact, no, we're letting go. Zen practice is about not gaining anything. There's nothing to gain. You are already complete. The problem is you don't know this. And so how do we find out how do we have an experience of being complete? We have to let go of our confusion, our self-centeredness, our opinions, and just learn how to be more in that direction. And Zen has a very clear way to do this. But it's not an intellectual, this is not an intellectual process. That's the problem I think we all have with it. We all tend to think in intellect and, oh, does that make sense? And we get, Zen is not about that. Zen is about letting go of all of that superfluous things that we think are so important and finding out who you really are, fundamentally. And so even though in the beginning there might be a sense that that's the way Zen is, it never was that way. And it isn't that way. And as you look more closely, we as students, we realize it is not. And I hope that makes sense. But that's how I would express it.
Yeah. And you were casting about for a word and you chose the word direct. And in asking my question, I used the word structured. And as soon as I said it, I didn't like it. Is the structure, in your opinion, is the structure three bells at the beginning, two bells during, one a big gong at the end. How is that important? How do you see that as being important to Zen practice?
Yeah, no, I think it's very important because, we have to have some agreements in this world. It's not like as if, hey, we can all do whatever we want. Let's just hang out. Let's have a great time. And, whatever happens is fabulous. It's, you can live that way. And a lot of people do. And we kind of see what happens, and so having some agreement on how are we going to practice together? How are we going to, if you get up off your cushion and you run into the next person next to you right away, okay, this is not necessary. Let's have some agreements on how we're going to work together. We're going to move in a clockwise way, and we're going to get up in this way. And then we don't have to go into our intellectual bag to think about, oh, how do we do this? What am I going to do now? And this, no, we just get up and we do it. We just take care of things without having to be burdened by a bunch of intellectualization about our practice. So that's a lot of the structure that we have. And that's one of the things I try to help with my students is sometimes when you look at Zen practice and you look at the chanting, it looks like, this is a little superfluous, don't you think? And is this really necessary? And, isn't this a little frou-frou? I had one student come and say, this is, how come there's so much mumbo jumbo in Zen? That's what she said to me. I laughed. I had to chuckle to myself. And I understand this. And she was from a Catholic tradition, where there is a lot of ceremony and a lot of things you don't understand at all. It's in Latin. I don't know what he's doing up there, but this is what we do every
Calling
Sunday.
the kettle black.
And so anyway, but I like to help my students understand ceremony is wonderful. Treat ceremony the same way you do your zazen. Dive in completely. Don't think about it, just do it, just be it. And this way we can do it as a group together. This is how we can have true fellowship where we're chanting this very meaningful, but we're not thinking about it, text, but we are actualizing what the meaning is by actually doing it wholeheartedly and not dwelling on thought. We are jumping in and just being and practicing our Zen practice through chanting, through walking meditation, through seated meditation, through our daily life. Treat the same way.
That reminds me of something Matsuoka Roshi said. He said, the chanting is the meaning of the chanting. It doesn't matter whether you're chanting in Japanese, English, or Latin, or whatever it is. It's a concrete thing. And he said, chant with your ears, not with your mouth, let alone your brain. Okay, so somebody else online, John?
I'm not seeing anyone at the moment. Oops, Kushin.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sensei, for your lovely appearance here. Full disclosure, I am a student of Zenku Sensei, so I do have a bias. I'm okay with what he's saying. But my thought came out of the last conversation. What I found, and perhaps you can talk more about it, Zenku Sensei, is when we have this shell of structure, this traditional structure for Zazen, and how we work together, doesn't that free us up to recognize the emptiness of the approach to Zazen, to Buddhist study in our case? It seems that adherence to a tradition, a structure, actually frees us to dive in, as you remind us, to this moment being the most important part of our practice, of our living, of our ability to congregate and communicate with one another. So maybe you can talk about how structure actually creates lack of structure.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well said. And so I hope that this point is coming through, and but the structure is not an intellectual structure. That's one thing to think about. One thing to think about, right? But to understand, it's we are habituating our practice so that, as Kushin said, so that we don't have to think about it. We can just do it. Zen practice is about actualizing our inherent completeness. We are actualizing. We're not thinking to become Buddhas. No, this is the wrong way. This is counterproductive. We are letting go of thought. We are just diving in to this moment. But the structures help us in how we organize ourselves, how we do things. I get up every morning and sit in the morning, and then I go down and make breakfast and coffee, and I do some other practices. I do Tai Chi Chuan, which I think is very simpatico with Zazen practice, and it now you got the whole body moving, and there's still this idea of just being present. And because I know the forms, I don't have to think about it, and I can just experience being in the moment. And but this is all we train ourselves as our primary platform is our Zazen practice, sitting in Zazen. How do we just be? How do we just experience what we are experiencing? How do we just experience what we're experiencing? What's coming up for us? We have 5 senses, and we have the thinking mind, and that's the only 6 ways that information comes to us. No other way. And so when this information is coming to us in Zazen, what are we doing with it? This is our practice. And are we able just to allow it to arise and sustain for a moment and then subside? Or do we have to grab it? Do we have to reject it? Can we just be with it? And so this is fundamental Zen practice. But the more we can get out of conceptualization, the more helpful, and the more I think we can deeply dive into our practice. But remember, practice is not just on the cushion. Use what we are learning in Zazen and put it into our everyday life. But it's not that, I had some students ask, well, when I'm at the office, should I just meditate at my desk for a little while each day or something? And I said, no, please don't do that. Don't do that. That's probably not good. But what you want to do in the office is do what you are doing completely. It's just like Zazen. Zazen is training us. Just dive into what we're doing. In other words, don't work on something here while I'm still mulling over a discussion I had earlier with somebody over here. Stay in the present with everything you're doing. And again, Zazen is training us to do that.
Thank you. Before we go to Jim, let me just one little point on that. Barbara Cohn, Serene of the Suzuki lineage, who was one of my teachers, my preceptor, ceremonial preceptor, she had a wonderful analogy for the relationship of practice to reality, if you will. She said the structure is like the lattice in the garden, and the actual practice is like the vine that grows on the lattice. The vine doesn't follow the lattice, but it uses the lattice to grow. That kind of analogy. But before we jump to Jim, let's see if somebody else in house. Yes, please give us your name again.
Ma'am. Yeah, I just had a question. Is there just any other like Zen trainings just to like eliminate self beliefs, like eliminating beliefs, in your opinion?
You know what? You're going to have try me again with that. I didn't quite. Yeah, come closer, and I would like to hear a little
This
better.
is Mandy.
Yeah, my name is Manly, and I just want to know, like, I know you're talking about Zhao Zen, but is there any other practices in Zen where you could just eliminate like limiting beliefs, have more confidence?
Uh, I like that. That's good. That's wonderful. That's straight out of Kongo Roshi, my teacher. You know, you know, confidence in everyday life. This is what Matsuoka Roshi said when he was asked, you know, what's the purpose of Zen? He said, confidence in everyday life. And how do we do that? We let go of our insecurities. We let go of our lack of confidence. Our innate Buddha nature is confident. It's just all of this superficial opinions and ideas we have about ourselves that are making us, you know, less confident and suffer. But to your question, you know, Zazen, Zazen is the practice. And that doesn't mean that everybody's Zazen form, bodily form, is the same. And it certainly doesn't mean that it's a cookie cutter process. It does not make everybody the same. In fact, it allows you to be you. So it makes us even more individualistic, and it allows us to come out. And so this idea that yes, mentally we are staying present as objects arise. We are watching, we are seeing them, and then we are allowing them to pass. You know, the expression of, you know, the blue sky does not in any way harbor or cause a problem for the white clouds floating by. You know, this is an image for our Zazen practice. Objects arise, just allow it to pass. It'll pass all by itself, but let it inform you, non-intellectually. Just be aware of it. Okay. And so, but back, I'll keep coming back to your question. There is no other practice than Zazen practice. But having said that, yes, Zazen practice teaches you how to do everything as your Zen practice. And so your Zen practice becomes everything you do all day long. And of course, sometimes we're not too good at it. Sometimes we have a problem and we're dwelling on it. And this happens to us whether we're longtime practitioners or not. But nonetheless, we're not just victim of our thinking mind. We have skills. We know how to let go, even though, you know, incessantly a problem may keep rearing its head, and we may, okay, but we know how to, we're as skilled at letting go of it as we may have habituated also bringing problems to our attention, if that, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
And but I'm gonna, Dogen comes to mind when you ask this question, by the way. He was a wonderful, one of our most important Soto Zen teachers in Japan. He founded Soto Zen practice in Japan, which we still model our practice off of. And he said, this is the practice. And the reason is, this practice, what are we doing? We don't sit in Zazen to become a Buddha. We don't sit in Zazen, you know, to become wise and to impress our friends. We are sitting in Zazen because this is how we actualize, this is how we affirm our innate Buddha nature. When you go beyond your own self-centered conceptualization, this is how you go in the direction of who you really are, your true nature. And so this is why there's only one practice. But this one practice fills everything. This is our life. And this is what Zen teaches. This is what Buddha taught.
let me add a
Thank
little
you.
comment to that while you get a cup of tea or something here for your cough, Zenku.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You know, again, you remind me of something Matsuoka Roshi said. He would say, just put your whole self into this simple act of sitting. If you can put your whole self into this zazen, you will gain the power to put your whole self into everything you do and become the strongest person in the world. But we say that for Kinhin walking meditation as well. Put your whole self into the walking. But I would add a little to that. People are driving on the expressway in traffic and a traffic jam, you know, and what I suggest is that if you sit still enough, long enough, straight enough, motor muscle memory will start to kick in. When you're driving, you find yourself sitting and stressed out because of the situation. You'll find yourself sitting up straighter, breathing deeper. Your body remembers this. Your body remembers the experience in the Zendo and brings it back into the boardroom if you're under a stressful presentation of some kind. But I do recommend that people take up chanting, memorization of the verses from India, China, Japan, and you can do that while you're driving on the expressway. So there are a few things like Nichiren was all about chanting because he was saying nobody's going to bother to sit in meditation. It's too hard, right? So he said, let's let them chant, you know. So chanting, I think, can be done. In other words, you can borrow certain pieces of it. The posture comes into your everyday life, the breath comes into your everyday life, and so forth. Wonderful. Your small screen again. I don't know
Yeah,
what's
thank you,
happening.
Roshi.
So Jim, we're back to
Roshi,
Jim,
thank
I
you.
think.
I,
Hey, you be
you know,
well.
I wanted to say something. Roshi, I wanted to say something. I hope you can hear me. But
I can hear you.
I think what you said, absolutely correct. And, but you know what, I guess what I'm saying is when we chant, we're chanting wholeheartedly, as you're saying, you know.
Yes, yes.
And as I practice Tai Chi Chuan, if you practice Tai Chi, we do it wholeheartedly. So the spirit of Zen, you know, the spirit of actualizing this moment is true, no matter what you do. So are there other practices? Yeah, there are maybe other physical forms you could see, but the fundamental principle is still the same.
Zazen.
Yeah.
Zazen. Somebody said, sit down and shut up. Somebody else said, shut down, sit up and shut down.
Yeah.
Okay, online, Jim Matson.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Jim.
Thank you for your talk. I've became associated with Zenku, I don't know, in the late 80s, I suppose, when I started going to the Zen Buddhist Temple of Chicago. And of course, Congo was the kind of the focal teacher up until his death in 99. And Zenku kind of carried the ball after that and was very sorely missed after 2005 in Chicago, certainly, in Evanston, rather. I think to echo what Zenku was saying, and really Congo Roshi, my experience in listening to him, I think he treated the Zendo as back in the 90s, Michael Jordan was the big focus in Chicago at that time. And I always think about that and in relationship to Zen practice, because those fellas they practiced every day, but they practiced in order to go out and play the game. And once they got out on the court or in the game, you never know what you can't think your way through a basketball game or a football game. You have to act and deal with whatever is around you without getting into all sorts of mental gymnastics about what's supposed to be happening or what that's not supposed to happen and all of that stuff. So I think, to echo what Zenku is saying, I think the practice is necessary to play the game, whatever game you're in. If you're in business, or if you're in a marriage, or parenting, or whatever the game, whatever human game you're playing, I think Zen is a common denominator because it offers you a place to practice and to
find a way or find your way to move in the world that probably creates less conflict and lets you play the game properly.
Yeah, very good, very good. I like that. I like that very much, Kozan. Thank you.
That reminded me also, I keep sharing things Matsuoka said because they're not written down anywhere for one. But he said, Willie Mays runs and catches the fly ball at the fence, for the 1,000th time. And, but one time he misses. Said, what happened? He missed. One time Willie Mays misses the catch one time. What happened? And he said, something happened. He was distracted by the runner. There was something going on at home. Something happened that came into that moment and made him miss the catch. So that's kind of the way he talked about the Japanese baseball teams being so good because they practice Zazen. But when they're catching the ball, that's all they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting, a story about Kongo Roshi. In the early going, when I knew Kongo, sports really wasn't his thing. He wasn't, sports were not a thing for him. It didn't really turn him on. He wasn't interested in it, let's put it that way. And so, but I've always been, my wife and I and our families, we've been interested in football and basketball and things like that. And we like sports. So when Michael Jordan started, his run in Chicago, those of us who really like sports were like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing that ever happened, and we had a better part of a decade of amazing sports. And I remember talking to Kongo Roshi early on about this, and he says, okay, whatever. And so anyway, little by little, he starts seeing the efficacy, and it was almost like Jordan is Zen in motion. It's like he actualized it, just like what Jim Matson was saying, and this really excited Congo, and it got to the point where I remember during some of the championship years, we would have a session in the spring, and often the NBA basketball championship would be on, and it's being played while we're sitting in Zazen. So we would finish at 9, at our Zazen, and the game would still be on. So we would go into this other room and we'd turn the game on, all of us, and watch the end of the game. And so I said, Roshi, you've made a complete transformation. That was really good. Yeah.
Okay, in-house, on-site. Anybody else? Bill? Okay. I'm not going to call you out, but please don't be shy if you have something you want to ask or say.
Let's see. I think Katsurio had his hand up earlier. Now he may have changed it. No, he doesn't. Okay, never mind. Okay, we're good.
Well, it's about noon. So with the change in daylight savings time, let's not get into Ben Franklin. So we typically close with the 4 great vows. We chant them 3 times and we strike a bell, but you won't be able to hear the bell online. Anything you would like to say, closing comments? Zenku? Very wonderful talk, I thought.
Great, thank you. No, I don't think so. I really enjoyed, I really enjoyed preparing for this talk because I didn't have to prepare at all. If anything, I purposefully didn't. If the thought came up, I just let it go, and I always know that's the best way. So it's good. I like giving a talk like this where I don't have to prepare.
You've been preparing your whole life for this talk.
That's good. That's good point. Good point. But good. Thank you. Good to see you all.
Okay, here we go. 3 bells. You won't hear them online because this microphone attenuates. Then we'll chant the 4 vows 3 times. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Thank you so much, Zenku-san. Thank everybody for your patience and listening. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. All right. Take care, everyone.
Zenku,
Thank
a
you.
few of us often linger for a few minutes, kind of in the Christian tradition of after the sermon
Okay.
fellowship. I'd like to invite you to stay for a few minutes just for
Okay.
some informal chatting. Do you have time for that?
I do. I do.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
I want to thank you for taking me back.
In those faces, put everything back where you found it. Teacups, etc.
Hojo, can you mute your microphone?
I'm just about.
There we go.
He's coming. Yeah.
Yes, we're there. Zenku, you took me back to a magical period in my life, late 60s, early 70s, that I walked into as an innocent college freshman in 1968. And because my father was being assigned, my stepfather was getting assignments in Vietnam, he could take the family wherever he designated. That was a privilege in the Army if you're in active combat. So I ended up spending 2 years, 2 separate years in Hawaii. And the second one, I was in college. And during this amazing, magical, mystical, it just felt like the environment for me, uh, very innocent, it just felt so amazing. I was living in Hawaii, and this is about 71. And there's this stream of yogis, gurus, teachers coming from the East, landing in Hawaii for a few days, giving a Dharma talk here, a lesson there, and then moving on to the United States. And I got to tell you, when you shared the little bit that you did, it generated that really strong nostalgia for the music. You know, all we're saying is give peace a chance. The communes, I
Right.
visited a commune in Hawaii, and they were literally just throwing seeds out, these young hippies, just throwing seeds out into this fertile land on a deserted farm and meditating and chanting and doing their yoga. And it thank you for taking me back to that one little piece that somehow I don't think I'll ever see again in my lifetime.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you for sharing that image. That's really good. And that perspective of, yes, obviously from Asia, they would be coming and Hawaii would be a natural stop. And why wouldn't you stop in Hawaii? You know, so it's like, and then come on. That's terrific. I had never thought of that quite that way, but that was a very special time. It was a very special time, you know, and I think it was a special time for those of us who were in it also. You know, it's like we were young, we were influenced by those times, And those influences, have carried me through the rest of my life.
Zenku,
So,
I,
I hear you.
I noticed this settling and becoming more professional and traditional in business. I saw that influence beginning to creep in. And today, I just don't see young people announcing that they want to chant and
Yeah.
sing and form communes in the woods and live in tents and geodesic domes. I don't encounter that
Yeah.
among the young people anymore.
Right. Right. I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I agree. But I tell you the truth, when you draft people to go to combat in a massive scale, that creates a tremendous amount of energy that and searching that I think unfolded. Obviously the civil rights movement that had a huge influence also. But when you say to people, sorry, you've got to go over to this country and you've got to fight and kill people, and maybe you'll get killed, that ups the ante tremendously. That really gets everybody's attention. Now you've got my attention. What am I going to do about it? Nowadays, there's nothing, you know what I mean? Nowadays, there's a lot of problems. And yes, we do have things getting our attention right now. We're not quite sure what to do with it. But getting our attention and getting organized around injustice, what we consider injustice, that was really palpable back in the 60s, and a tremendous force for, I think, some of these very positive things that happened. Yeah.
Corolla, we haven't heard your voice this morning. What's coming up for you uh, when you listen to Zenku?
That was a lovely talk. And I
Thank you,
like
Carla.
your emphasis on my motto, which is Zen is about doing what you're doing while you're doing it, rather than doing something else. And,
Right, exactly. I like it.
that's our practice is,
Yeah.
and I really liked your part about the forms. That when you've learned the forms, you can do the forms because you're not thinking, oh, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
You know what to do now. And because you know what to do now, you are free to do what you're doing rather than thinking, oh, do I bow here or do I, which is a huge distraction. And that too is the one guy was saying is a confidence builder. And that confidence carries over into other things that you do. So thank you. That was lovely talk.
Yeah. Thank you for playing that back. That sounds great, Corolla. Thank you for your words. Appreciate it.
And Stuart, thank you for your presence this morning in our Zendo and for sharing a little bit of your path in the early part of your life. Thank you for that.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Zenku, thank you for sharing. But it's truly thank you for your teaching. And you've been teaching your entire life. And it never stops.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zenku. Thank you all.
Yes.
Any last comment before we wrap this up?
I think the thing to do now is, as Matsuo Kuroshi would say, don't give up. Keep 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 practicing. Keep practicing.
Stay sharp.
Anyway, great to see you all. Take care.
Grand Sumo Highlights is about to come on TV, so that's my sport.
Okay, very good. Bye bye now.